Um, Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. Side propositions believes that if you let that man win the squid, you make him happy for some time before loan sharks eat him up. If you let him plant the squid, he gets to see the loan sharks die, and he gets to uplift himself as a bigger, better squid. 4 pieces of setup before I move into my substantive today. The first on who this actor is, because I believe that this actor has gone through the game, has won a lot of things. He had to beat through a lot of other people to get this money. He doesn't really have that strong of a moral compass in and of itself, or else he wouldn't really have participated in a game inherently. But secondly, he's kind of poor because like oftentimes he lacked a job, he doesn't really have that employable skills. That's why he's the most vulnerable actor in which the previous Squid Game organizers decided to target him, because there's little possibility in which he can actually uplift himself in normal status quo and in conventional society. But secondly, what does being the frontman be? It looks like 3 things. Number 1, you're able to organize the games, you're able to plan out what to play, you get to like just what the rules, etc., and like how people actually win. But secondly, you also get to pick who to actually recruit in this case, where they're able to actually just choose which are the most potential candidates. But thirdly, you also get to know inside information. So who is watching the games, who they are, what they do, their identity, etc. Most often or not, these individuals are quite rich. But thirdly, what does our proposition support? We support taking this offer to be the front man and do good in the job. We just believe that it's intuitive to believe so. But it's also that you tell your family that you died already and you won't really be coming back into conventional society. This is the job that you start and end with through your life. Number 4, the debate's about the interests of the actor. So long as we show to you how best this actor can be at the end of our world, we're just going to win the debate. The debate shouldn't be and cannot be about morals, because if you do not be the front man, someone else will be. There's no way for someone else to solve this vicious cycle, and the moral harms in this debate are highly symmetrical, but people will still die. There are 2 substantive I want to bring in this case. The first is on the inherent randomness of life and the instability of it, to show why it's extremely harmful to opt back to conventional society. But secondly, how do we guarantee greater success and fulfillment for this person in the future? The first is on the inherent randomness of life and the instability of it. The first layer to this is the randomness of life, because there are 3 things to note in the status quo. Number 1, these individuals live in a capitalist system that systemically screws individuals over, where the volatility of the market and the employment rate is always there, where individuals are unlikely going to have a certain life. That's why the prevalence of these individuals being poor, and that's why I have like a few hundred people getting to participate in the games every now and then. But secondly, people with zero employment and usable abilities are often trapped in debt, but they're unlikely able to escape from it, whereas current state structures, thirdly, also should be a world where the stigma and the help given to the poor is minimal and the hatred towards them is maximum. That's why the games were seen as a preferable outcome instead of welfare, or instead of any help that was plausible in society. But secondly, so I think the trade-off that opposition wants us to make is that this person isn't really going to get that cash payout in this case. The second layer deals with why exactly you're going to lose your money in the long term and why is life still miserable. There are 4 layers to this. The first, you having to repay the debts that you owe previously significantly takes out most of the money that you earn, because loan sharks are very well known to be having high interest rates, and that you being gone for like a few weeks for these games already compounded in the interest to quite an extent already, and previously you couldn't pay back, so it's going to be even more. But secondly, a lot of time you've been disadvantaged for a long time. You believe that you have so many obligations that things should fulfill, such as like getting custody of your child, buying them a lot of their stuff. You often lose out on a lot of money and unfortunately spend it once in a go when you have the ability to do so. But secondly, you also get tied down to conventional social responsibilities, where individuals often are not like pressure into having a family, taking care of your children, actually being able to sustain them until like they graduate college or etc. A lot of times it's still quite pressuring and still miserable. But thirdly, capitalism is damn ruthless. There's always a possibility in which this individual will just get scammed by people on the ground who just takes away all their money because of the volatility of everyone else and the inherent incentive for everybody to earn as much as possible at the expense of others. But lastly, there's also a lack of employable skills and abilities where you're already kind of middle-aged. It's hard for you to have that easy vocational training programs to opt into a job, but if you do, it's oftentimes you're going to get replaced easily by another person young. Thirdly, what is the impact to this? I'll take you later. 3 things specifically. The first is just more or less the way in which you die is still the same. You're going to lose money, you're going to be poor on side of opposition. Secondly, the worst case is that more likely you're going to revert back to the bad habits that you might have previously to cope with the problems that you now face in society. So like gambling, drinking, impulsive decisions that screw you over in the long run. But since you now have money, you're going to make it even further. You're going to magnify it to the largest extent in order to fill that gap in your heart when you feel miserable and shit in society. But thirdly, this is a one-time cash injection. The actor is forced to use this money sparingly in the best case of side of opposition, or be scared of it almost like just losing out someday. It will be less materialistic happiness in the long term where they can't feel secure enough to not spend away all the 45.6 billion won. Before I move into how we guarantee a better success, sure, I'll take one from Ken.
I'm not sure if you watch Squid Game, but I'm pretty sure you get around what, 168 million? Why is that not enough for you to find your own job, for you to find your own house, or just migrate to a different country?
Firstly, it's just you're gonna spend a lot of it on debt already because you're already in debt. But secondly, I think I already explained to you the volatility of the market is quite low. But thirdly, it's also that you don't really have that employable skill sets, or you don't really have that much of ability to actually, invest in the stock market and make sure that everything goes well in this case. Self-opposition has so much burden to actually prove so. But so long as our proposition in this debate can guarantee better success, I think we're able to win on it. There are a few things to show why you actually get greater success and fulfillment. There are 3 reasons why. The first is that you just get to organize the games. It does not require that much skill or knowledge for you to do so. You just need to know how childhood games goes and what the rules, etc. But secondly, there's also a constant stream of income. There's a fixed income compared to no income on side of opposition. You get greater amounts of financial freedom in which you can always get a constant stream of money that won't run out. But thirdly, you're just more secure. You're away from society. You escape from the loan sharks, the people who hate you, the people who stereotype you as a poor person, the people who always expect you to have a family and to live for everybody else. But secondly, what does success look like? It looks like also 3 things. The first is on financial security, because whatever you whatever you want through this while not losing out on money, it's just more certain on our side. You get to also have so much access to the information, to the richest people around the world who watch these games, form connections with them, get information about these individuals, and ensure that you have a safety net in the identity of them. Secondly, there's also a sense of power and position that never will be achieved before. You're able to actually determine who dies during this game. It's like you get to plan out the game and then someone's gonna die. There's so much power. You also get to determine who to choose, who to pick. A lot of these times power is really important because of the third layer, the sense of fulfillment also. That organizing the game requires to put you some degree of effort. When you see the outcomes accruing when rich people enjoying the show and watch it, that's where I actually feel fulfilled. That's where I actually think that your effort has been put in and a good outcome has occurred. The third thing to why is this important? There are 4 layers to why this is impactful. Number 1, we do not want the individual to relapse into the same situation again. We mitigate the worst forms of harm by absolutely rejecting it into our new life. There's no way return to the worst habits possible. Secondly, we get monetary happiness because there's one that's more sustainable under our side, because the constant stream of income reduces the worry that you have that money is going to be worn out in the future. This amount of money ensures that you're able to spend it you're able to actually just spend how many bucks that you want and still have money to be secure in your life. Thirdly, you have more freedom because you're now in the position to make decisions freely and are able to decide what you want in the next game, what you want in this, etc. You're no longer bound to societal concepts and constructs that force you to actually be a slave for someone else or to actually just follow with society's rules. Fourthly, there's a greater chance of uplift because we're able to utilize this connection that you get in order to have more intel inside the rich people's lives, get to have new friends, relationships that help you out in need whenever you need them. The metrics in which we win this debate on is firstly, the long-term prospects of things are way better on our side of the house, that this individual can live longer without having to worry about all of these things. But secondly, the degree in which we're able to sustain this happiness and are able to maximize it is also true when we actually accept to be the front man of this job. We're very proud to propose. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, first prop. Now calling on first op here.
Okay, I'm guessing I'm audible. So preferred gender for now, she, her, and then POI through voice. Just quickly give me a second while I just arrange my notes. Okay, starting my speech. Wait, sorry, just starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. reading the entirety of government's case is premised upon the fact that this 45.6 billion won is not enough for the individual to sustain themselves. Therefore, they'll have to go through the impacts of things like employment, like volatility of the market, and things like that. Now, we did the calculation, and 45.6 billion is approximately 600, wait, what's the number again? A few millions, 126 million Malaysian ringgit. And I personally think that that's enough for you to sustain your entire life. I'm unsure as to what government is spending on. I don't know, like spending on like tens or 30 gigantic measures. I'm unsure as to what government is exactly doing. But I feel like personally, the amount of money given to you is enough for you to sustain yourself. I have two responses to this quickly. Number one, why, like they say that the reason why you're going to quickly lose money and quickly go into debt again is because like the debt that you have accumulated over time is just a lot. Number one, I'd like to just point out the fact that you already consented to the fact that like these individuals were poor in the past. This is to say that I'm unsure as to how much they're actually borrowing, to the point that like 126 million Malaysian ringgit isn't enough for them to like return to the loan sharks. I'm pretty sure they're just going to borrow a very minimal amount of debt, unlike, you know, borrowing like billions and billions of dollars as very poor individuals, as you have considered on your side of the house. Secondly, they claim that you cannot sustain yourself because you do not have a job. I don't think that this is true, because even if you cannot sustain yourself, I'm pretty sure with the money you can invest. And it's not to say you don't have any knowledge to invest, because you can hire things like people hire investors or hire like fund management, like fund manager to manage your fund in order to earn a profit in the long term, so it becomes more sustainable in the long run. Secondly, it's just they say that like for some reason like you will spend all your money on things like gambling to cope with the trauma. Number one, I think like if you want to talk about trauma, I think trauma just way worse on your side when you're literally organizing games that kills people. Number two is to say that like you're going to get screwed, like you're less likely going to screw over yourself because you know how it was like to be in debt in the past. Therefore, you're going to just be extra careful in the present because of the fear of repeating the same mistakes. And the third thing that they premise upon is like getting connections. But I think that's premise upon the fact that the rich people do want to connect with you in the first place, especially when you come from a very poor family and you come from like and the reason why you're rich is because of mere luck. I'm sure why they want to interact and how you're going to supposed to build connections to begin with. And our panel, I want you to quickly put yourself in Gi-hyun's shoe, which is the protagonist of the games, like having to go through very horrific games, seeing the people you once trusted die before you, and surviving merely on luck and betrayal of your friends. I think these sort of visceral memories are things that you cannot forget in your life. And thus, we think the main interest of the actor now is not to like, oh, organize games and have more trauma and add fuel to the trauma that he already pre-existing have. The main interest of the actor now is to reduce the trauma with the money that they have and live a better life in the long run. Now, just moving on to myself. To understand the incentive, just take one before I go on. Yes?
The volatility of capitalism that you've previously gone through shows that you are scared and you're worried that money will be gone. That means you aren't really going to just spend it that easily. Why then are you able to get that financial happiness having unlimited amounts of money?
Number one, like I already proved to you that number one, it's a huge sum of money and you can hire investors and fund management who probably have a lot like experience within the market and know how the market flows and probably can prevent these kind of things from happening to begin with. And secondly, I'm just going to prove to you how you're just likely going to die earlier. So even if you have a large amount of money in the long run, it's still useless. Now, quickly just going to point out the actors' incentive of joining this game in the first place. They join these games in hopes of returning their debt. Secondly, they join this game because they want to live their life as a free man, because they have been structurally disenfranchised for such a long time. And thirdly, because they want to repay their families, like how Gi wants to repay his mom, because his mom has been helping him for such a long time. Thus, we think the burden of this motion just wish I better for the acting law. Now, just going to quickly move on to my arguments. Number one, or why we would prefer agency over having extra income like what our government wants to talk about. Now, before that, we just need to clearly understand the incentive structures of the actors. Number one, it's just the reason why we join the game is to return our debt. Secondly, if you understand how it felt like to be in debt in the past, you would more likely want to crave to be a free man. You don't want to be trapped within another structures like another death game or even be connected to it. You will more likely want to use that money to enjoy some sort of luxury in life. Secondly, is why we prefer, thirdly, why you prefer agency is because you're going to constantly live in the fear of dying once again. Because once you don't meet the needs of the creators or like the rich elite people, you're also going to die, and therefore, like life is just like significantly worse when you constantly live in this sort of fear. And Fourthly, it leads to more trauma because like you're organizing games that literally kill others. You're gonna literally see killing like children or even like old people, and they're literally gonna die for the wrong reasons. I think trauma just gonna significantly worse on your side of the house, and without whether you could, even if you like have more money, whether you can actually live your life to the best with that amount of money. So other than that, why you comparatively would prefer to not organize the games and just live a better life? For example, I can like enjoy the luxuries with the amount of $162 million that you have. Number two is just that like you can just use that amount of money to repay your families and build more emotional connections with your loved ones, because once you become the organizers, I doubt you can actually see your loved ones like the movie where like the brother couldn't see like his other brother because like he was stuck in the game, and like the organizers didn't want him to go because once he go he will expose, like he will potentially like expose everything, so he's like trapped in the game forever, and that hinders your ability to connect with your loved ones. And thirdly, we think if you want like some sort of meaning in your life, you can also use the money to help the most vulnerable people on the ground, and that prevents like a larger amount of people from entering the Squid Game once you have used this money to help others as well. So the comparative here is just the trauma is reduced on our side. I know like we don't need to like prove that trauma is completely reduced, but to some extent it's just comparatively lesser compared to organized Squid Game that literally kills people. Now I'm just going to quickly move on to my next argument on why you're likely to die. Because understand, like the prerequisite for side of government to enjoy all the benefits of having a sustainable income and living like I don't know, taking revenge on their loan sharks or something like that. The prerequisite to all this is to not die. And why is it likely that you're gonna die faster compared to ours of the house? Because number one, understand that you're easily replaceable in the Squid Games. Because it's true that every year there's always going to be one winner, and thus every year there's always going to be someone who could replace you as the front man. Therefore, like you're easily replaceable once you don't meet the needs of your like the rich people. Number two, because of the power asymmetry that exists within the rich and you, therefore it's more likely that like they have easy control over you, and like they can just assassinate you without anyone knowing. Thirdly, is because like you're gonna be more like if the police do catch you, because like in the movie like Junho did, like the policeman, they tried to like send the clips out and he wanted to take revenge. Thus, if the police do catch you, you'll be morally culpable. And I did some research. That's death sentence in Korea, I think. Therefore, you're gonna die either ways. And fourthly, because you cannot effectively run this game wise. So because like you're incapable of organizing two complex games, like what self-government wanted to concede to say that these people are like people who probably like uninformed, previously informed, or do not have much education and experience to begin with, therefore they cannot understand the market. I think the same works here. But since you have been history disenfranchised for all these organizations, you're more incapable of actually organizing such complex games with like hiring people to take care of the games, or even like having like knowing what to put here and there in order to put people to death. Fourthly is to rebut them also, is to say that you do not have the social skills and connections as a poor people because you don't have the pre-existing experience on how to interact with them. Fifth is just a very unrealistic, like if you cannot meet the needs, because like the expectations of the rich every year just grows, because like there's already a lot of death games and like it can't fulfill their needs. Therefore, you need something to boost their adrenaline. So you more likely have to reach a very unrealistic expectations, and if you don't, you'll get killed, like what the info sites say. So the comparative here, all you need is to not report, all you need is to just live a happy life, and therefore, like we just do not want to die all over again, and therefore we do not want to accept this offer. Now we got propose. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. First up, now calling on second prop here.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Just give me 1 second. All right. Nice. Pull out my timer. Everything down. Yep. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, ops strategy was incredibly unstrategic. They function on the presumption that you will always have money and be completely like untraumatized in their world. We see this with the moment they lost the debate. But very quickly, recognize this was a debate about the interest of the actor and what's best for them. This goes to say, A, in which world is the actor more happy? We will prove why the actor's exclusive benefits are more in our world and why they are just more financially stable and hence more happy. This debate then becomes about what constitutes this happiness for the actor. But very quickly, what was the burden we had to prove to you today? The moment we prove the actor is a happy individual in our, we win. The question then becomes crucially, what does this happiness and peace of mind actually look like? In regard to the principal dilemma, we will prove exclusively why you are better able as an individual in our world to justify your actions while still remaining incredibly financially happy. Very quickly then, Ming does an excellent job framing explicitly why the world is a terrible place to you and why you are likely to lose your financial spoils, hence why you're a lot happier in ours. The clash then exists on 3 levels. A, in which world are you more financially fulfilled? In which world do you feel a peace of mind and inherent peace? So this looks like just the isolation of secrecy versus like being back and functioning in society. And lastly, what do your moral dilemmas actually look like in both worlds? By the end of my speech, I would have proven why we win on every single issue, including why even in our worst case, we have the better world. Up needs to prove either that your actors will be financially stable while being able to clear their debts in Upward, while also proving that this is a society in which you are inherently happy. Recognize the second issue is largely based on the first one being true. The moment we prove a significant circumstantial margin where you are actually going to lose your money in Up, we win because it's already a concession. You will be financially taken care of in our world, and we prove like a way more happier individual as opposed to your individual who has to integrate back into society. Very quickly then, what do you share in terms of engagement coming out from Op? You heard this in the intro, right? Like apparently that these individuals are always going to be rich. Crucially, Op loses because of this severe lack of comparison. Within my speech, I'll prove to you why we win on both trauma and finance. Very quickly then, you heard no response to either things that Ming brought up. First of all, he talked to you about the just inherent randomness of life and the instability of it. Secondly, he talked to you about how we guarantee greater success and fulfillment for you. There is no response to the second argument except for calling out the harms which exist and the trauma which exists within like playing the game, something I'm going to deal with very quickly in my worst case, best case. But secondly, on the principle of inherent randomness, I think it's just inconsistent case characterization for you to characterize these individuals as poor and desperate, and then suddenly being able to garner the financial literacy to constantly stay rich, being incredibly smart with their wealth, not going broke. I'm going to deal with this, but before that, I'll take your PY.
I know we're in debate land, right? But if you were to go back to reality for just 1 second, right? If capitalism was so unstable, why do rich people exist?
Capitalism is like the rich people exist within capitalism because rich individuals are financially literate. Rich individuals grew up in wealthy households. Rich individuals were taught how to invest in stock markets. Rich individuals were taught how to access like the best financial managers. The average poor individual who is already in debt is not going to be able to access this. Crucially then, why are you going to lose a lot of money? And I think this is going to deal with everything that Gov has told you so far, right? The very fact this is a question clearly displays why Op is the worst representative of fulfilling the happiness of the actor. Having substantially more money doesn't change the fact that you are the product of the capitalistic system where you are a poor individual in massive debt. It is more likely than not that you blow your money and go broke incredibly quickly. Easy come, easy go. Why is this then true? You spend because you've never had money like this before. This looks like buying a mansion, buying a Lamborghini, bad financial decisions, because these are all the things which would have previously made you inherently happy. These are all the things which you wish you had when you're sitting by the sidewalk trying to figure out how to pay your debts. Based on these circumstances, being in debt and broke, and like previous financial positions and skills of the actor, not just are you more likely than not to go broke, you're also way more likely to be unable to gain funds at that skill in any other way other than going back to the games or getting just a very base model job where you're miserable, you earn a single middle class income, right? Because at the end of the day, the only way you're going to make that level of money is if you go back to the games. We've already proven to you why you're unlikely to have the financial literacy to hold that capital, but why you're also unable to make it if you were to ever lose it. For example, you're going to be like the average broke to middle class person that won the lottery, right? Because those individuals lose it very quickly. I think this is just a losing battle for you guys to push. I think you should drop this. But assuming the instance you do hold on to your wealth out of fear, you are just unable to be likely to enjoy the fruits of it, like things like luxury and happiness anyway, due to the constant fear of really losing it all at the end of the day. We win the moment we prove to you no one exists in the middle ground. If you've never had money, you're either incredibly conservative with that money or incredibly just blatantly blowing it. So you either lose it all or you're never really able to enjoy it. Why then, panel, we win today's debate? Very quickly on the worst case, best case. Let's go over the worst case and what happens then. Let's say on our worst case, right? You live financially happy, but relatively short. For example, say you make a mistake in the game, you die. Crucially, however, you likely feel a lot more fulfilled. This goes to say for every individual you kill, you feel like you liberate them from the same oppressive structures you just rejected when taking this offer. Furthermore, you likely live the last years or months of your life with incredible comfort, isolated from the structures that made you miserable. Crucially, you die having lived your final moments carefully and morally not guilty. Why is that then true, panel? Because recognize, if you rejected the narrative of society as such a harmful capitalistic structure that you never wanted to want to go back through. If you're willing to stay with the games, even if it meant risking your life, that literally means that you would have preferred death to actually going back to the capitalistic system. To the 456 individuals whose lives you govern in the next game, you are then able to liberate these individuals, because in your mind, you feel like it's better for these individuals to die than to go back to those oppressive structures. In your mind, you're inherently happy because you feel like these individuals are happier because of you. Best case then in your world, let's say you deplete your financial reserve, having lived the financial carefree life you always craved. It is incredibly likely you end up at the end of the day, at best, in a financially stable average job or worse, as you have no previous skill or likely have poor education and are likely to be desperate and poor, right? Within these instances, do you feel the contrast of how you live and how you live? Like within these instances, you feel the actual contrast of how you live and how you currently live. Furthermore, it is within these instances when you are constantly reminded and ask yourself as to whether those thousands dying and those who you personally killed were worth the enjoyment you no longer embrace and are likely enjoy it for a short period of time. This regret exists exclusively in your world because you chose the value of society and its structures over the game. Hence, the cruel society over dying in the game as a result of a mistake. Even at best, you die poor, regretful, and unfulfilled. Realistically, you might return to the game. In like the 455 out of 456 chance you lose, you die desperate and miserable as a result of the society you chose to reject exclusively in God. Why do we win then? A, we can guarantee even in our very worst case, you are somewhat happy throughout isolation. In op, you are likely miserable in the long term because you lose money. B, in our worst case, you are likely also more morally fulfilled than in op because you buy into the narrative that by making a mistake was better than returning to the cruel society that many other participants are forced to bear the brunt of, desperate and broke. Panel, why is this important? We say even in our most unlikely instances, Young improves. The games are relatively straightforward. We comfortably get ahead. If this was a debate about happiness, then we've already won. Recognize this exclusively deals with everything Elo wanted to talk about. Because what did Elo really bring to you? She brought to you this argument about all the things you're going to be able to do with your money. She brought to you this argument about how you're going to be constantly traumatized. She brought to you this argument about how you're going to be broke. We actively take down the fact that you're going to be broke in our world, that you're not going to be broke in our world. We actively take down the fact that you're going to be traumatized in our world. If it exists on a spectrum, you're going to be way more traumatized in their world. But lastly, panel, we are able to prove to you that in our world, you're just overall a way more happy individual. In our world, you're way more likely to blow your money than to spend it in other areas. In our world, you're way more likely to not have that financial literacy. We comfortably win today's debate because at the end of the day, it was about three things. In which world you financially fulfill? We win that. In which world you feel a peace of mind, inherent peace? We say we win that because of trauma. In which world, what your moral dilemmas to try and book was? We comfortably get ahead. I've never been prouder to propose.
All right, thanks, second prop. Now calling on second op. Here.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll take POIs in the chat. I will start in 3, 2, 1. If the goal of this debate was that capitalism was bad, and if the previous two speakers from the proposition were correct in absolutely everything they've said so far, then capitalism and the harms of a system that constrains your agency is far worse on the proposition. Two crucial clarifications I have to make here. The first thing to say is that you can't psychoanalyze this person and say that they don't really care about life as much. Because when you opt into the Squid Game, you do not have the full information of what consists the Squid Game. They cannot say this person wants to die more than staying within capitalism, because that's blatantly untrue. Because you did not know you had to kill 99 other people when you opted into the Squid Game in the first place. So that's not enough of a basis to analyze why this person cares about this thing other than X. The second thing to point out here was that even on the best case of their side, we are able to live a stable life. The question was, so if y'all agree that death is better than a life of constant suffering, then they have to analyze whether the life their side would have was also going to be one alleviated of constant suffering, because we think the agency they had under their side was constantly limited because your life goal was only ever constrained within you having to solve this game. Three arguments I want to talk about just directly engaging with their side. The first is that why we donate further money and this agency is far better under our side. I'll take you guys in the chat, don't worry, I'll actually take one. So do we have financial stability on our side? I think this undercuts all the arguments. The first is that their claim is to give have a lack of employable skills, which I like to point out is completely symmetrical because you don't have a lack of skills in order for you to run the games efficiently. But the comparative under here is that you're likely to have far less time in order to gain the skills that you will need in order to run the game. The reason for this is because you running the game is time sensitive because it's not dependent on anything else. The reason why you need a job in the first place is because you need to make further money in the future. The reason why you need to run the Squid Game is because you want to prevent mistakes and you want to prevent you from being killed because you run the game inefficiently. So you're a greater race against time to solve these problems under proposition. And because you are a person who has been newly inducted into this system, it's unlikely you are going to get those skills. What's the comparative? Safety net for some time as you develop your skills because you have millions of dollars. As you take a university degree, you can still use some of that money to pay off your living expenses. So it's probably better on both sides. The comparative is better. Secondly, you can often do things like investing and just have some safety net for a period of time. Because I just want to emphasize the scale of this. It is within millions even after you pay off the debt. So getting out of the Squid Game is something that's going to be good as well. So like you're not going to be dirt poor. I think that's uncharitable characterization from the other side because your debt is not in the millions. But even in the worst case, where you have very little money after paying off your debts, that's still better than being a slave to a system of wealthy rich people that could kill you at any time because you're not fully aware of the contract you were opting into in the first place. Because even if you had the information as to what the contract constitutes, there's no ability to hold them accountable because number one, the Squid Game is not under the contractual obligations of the law because it's an illegal system. But number two, the power asymmetry characterized to you by the leader of opposition means that you're unable to ever have a bargaining chip to ensure that you have greater protections within that system. Second argument here is about why do we actually value money in the first place? I would suggest that it's a gateway for freedom and agency. Money has no intrinsic value. This is the underlying premise for all your argumentation, that money is good. If the ultimate goal of the actor is to expand their choices and agency, that's impossible on opt because per their own setup, you're permanently stuck within this system for the rest of your life and can never opt out. But the second reason here is that money has decreasing marginal utility over time. If you give a poor person a cash handout of $1,000, that may change their life. But for a rich person who makes $1,000 a minute, the actual value of that money goes down. But thirdly, many rich people and celebrities are still deeply unhappy because even though they have material resources, most people strive for immaterial happiness, like your family, your religion are still valuable to the person because your immediate priority is not being the richest person on the planet, but rather being able to pay off your immediate debts. And after that, it's for you to actualize your own self. That's not possible under the other side when you're constantly and permanently stuck within the system. But let's deal with the characterization. There's volatility and randomness of capitalism. Number one, I don't know what this actually looks like, so it's severely under-analyzed from the proposition at this juncture in the debate. But number two, it contradicts their own analysis because if you need to pay off the debts, then they can't simultaneously claim that these people won't spend money at all. But thirdly, they don't prove the scale of this. Even if capitalism is volatile, it can't be volatile to the degree that you spend all of your money in the hundreds of millions, that all your money loses its value within the next 1 or 2 years. You have to debate in a reasonable ground here. So what we think is probably you have to lose out some of your money because you have to pay off your debt. Probably you lose some of your money because you have some form of financial mismanagement, but you're no longer constrained within the time-sensitive issues that exist when you have to run the game. You can still have a financial safety net as you build up your skills for a few years, as you invest, as you start a small business, and even if you fail in that regard, it's okay. Because if you fail at starting up a small business, at worst you just lose $10,000. If you fail on proposition, your life is lost. That the life is the prerequisite to any of their benefits on happiness. Before that, Varun, sure, why not?
Why are individuals likely not to be hella traumatized in your world, especially when after getting the opportunity to go back into the game and plan it, they rejected that, showing that they value like just society over there?
Two things. I want to make this very clear. Why will this lead to more trauma and mental harm? So I'm just skipping to the third point because it's the third point. When you're killing people as a participant of the Squid Game, it's self-defense. Because if you do not kill them, you will be killed and you will die. What's the comparative? Now you consensually chose to take the offer, fully aware that you have to kill others. When you opted into the Squid Game in the first place, you did not know you had to kill others. It was just a system that says, yeah, I can have a lot of money. That's the comparative here. So if Varun says that you care about poor people and want to put them out of their misery, that's probably far likely to be worse on their side because you're consensually choosing to kill others. Whereas on their side, the comparative is you don't kill people, you're literally going to be killed by the other participants in the Squid Game. So self-defense is not, it's like what we support. Also, like they can't claim self-defense is symmetrical because you're not likely to have self-defense at the point where you have millions of dollars in your bank account. But secondly, even if you're completely fine with killing others, the fact that you may mess up is still terrible for your mental harms. Because living every single day of your life in fear and mental distress that you may make a mistake while running the Squid Game, that you may eventually screw up, means that you're likely to always live your life in fear. And this means that even if you have infinite amounts of money, infinite amounts of stability stuck within one room in the Squid Game arena, you're deeply unhappy. It's like, so it doesn't really lead to anything. But thirdly, even if you're not directly causing the mistakes, the fact that rich people at the top can blame you for it because it's politically easier to blame the front man and to blame other rich people. Because think about it, why would this system choose a random poor individual than one of their own rich people? It's probably because they want to use you as a scapegoat, because it's easier for them to just kill you and replace you with someone else rather than actually having to hold another person accountable. So even if it's not circumstances that were caused by you, the fact that the Squid Game messing up due to external circumstances can be attributed back to you means that at any point in time, something out of your control actually happens, you will be held liable with it through death. But second argument here is also about why you cannot effectively run these games. And this deals with the underlying premise of their entire case. Because their case just says, yeah, opposition bad, but like at least be able to run the games. Why can't you run the games? Number one, you need many skills as well. And as we proved to you, there's a time-sensitive thing that you have to deal with that. So it's not what Yang Ming asserts. You do need complex skills to run these games. You need to psychologically analyze how these people operate. You need to make the games have lots of tension so the rich people can gamble. Because if it's boring, then like rich people won't gamble, then you got no money to fund your games. But number two, to make the Squid Game successful, you need connections with other rich people. Why is this true? Number one, you want the rich people to come to your games and fund those games, and you want to gamble at your games. But the reason why this is important is, as a poor person, you probably do have some resentment towards the rich people already, per their own analysis, because they actively contributed to, or at the very least were complicit in the circumstances that led to your suffering in the first place. What this suggests is that you are probably not going to be able to run these games very efficiently. And note that failing to make people come to the game or failing to make profits is still caused as a mistake, because even if it wasn't a mistake, because they could say that someone else would have done this better. So it's not very clear, because even if there's a clear contract that's given to you, we told you why that contract can be violated at any time and you can't report them for it. Final thing here is about why you're likely to be like attributed. So their side can't claim that you're going to die anyways and the Along will get to you, because like, so it's like you can probably move to a different city or you can hire some guards. But the key distinction on their side is you officially affiliate yourself with running the Squid Game. Under your side, under our side, you can use the defense that I didn't know the Squid Game was going to make me kill people. But under their side, you have the full information to make these things. So at the point where you're held liable, because more and more people are going to, like, one day someone will probably find out. So what this means that more and more people are going to find out, you'll be held liable because you consensually caused the death of many people. At this point in the debate, there are many things that are out of your control. The immediate priority of this person is to settle down, let them use their money in the best way possible, because they can still do it. Otherwise, he's going to be like my friend Spider-Man here. He's going to have his head cut off, his brains are going to be blown out. And so therefore, at the end of this debate, you have nothing. We are very proud to oppose.
All right, thanks. Second up, now calling on third prop. Here.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, nice. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's always Squid Game, but never hot Squid Game, flaming Squid Game, or never like frozen ice cold Squid Game, right? The thing is, you probably will want to know about it like Squid Game season 2, right? But here's the problem, right? If you go under side opposition world, the problem is season 2 is probably never going to happen. So therefore, side opposition loses the debate. But then moving on, right? We didn't make it clear from the very get-go that opting back into the game to justify the trauma was already opting back to planning the game, right? Not that government is opting back to play the games, right? We just literally are planning, right? So theoretically, we are not going to kill any people, right? But we think that even in the worst case where we are killing individuals, we don't think that it's going to be as bad as one would think. We don't think that the trauma is going to be as bad as side opposition is doing, right? Because few things that I'd like to also clarify in my speech, right? Because notice how side opposition is extremely dismissive, right? Where they just say that, trauma is bad, oppressive structures and whatnot, right? But without actually properly engaging in our case, right? We don't think this is how side opposition is actually having a charitable debate, right? We think we need to be much more comparative in order to win today's debate, right? Because two main issues that I present in my speech, right? First one is which side provides more success towards this individual, and secondly is that the life of the survivor and how are they going to look like future and down the road. right? So first, notice how the main stakeholder, right? Who is this main stakeholder in today's debate? This is a middle-aged man who cannot work anymore. He's physically almost unfit by that point. He's extremely vulnerable. He's subjected to the capitalist world, and he's also limited in skill set, right? This means chances of employment is already much more little by then, right? We think that three main things that already dictate a large amount of his how his life is going to look like, right? We think that the first part comes in is the uncertainty of life, right? We think this is something that's not properly dealt with in opposition, right? Just saying that things like, oh, let's have investment managers and somehow the world's good and somehow he's going to be much more happier, right? Because you can't just say, oh, investment managers or start your own company, right? And say that, oh, even if you lose that, you only lose 10,000, right? Notice that you have to like bear a lot of unlimited liability. These are individuals that have to eat a lot of money, right? We think that even if you're going to hire all these investment managers and all goes well, we think it's more like to flip over and to say that, it does need commission at the end of the day, right? But we think that even if they say trying to say that, oh, job is done because of money, and you say that why not just go to school and whatnot, right? Go to universities and get your degree, right? We think all of these things take time, right? We think that as a person that main stakeholder in this debate, we think that going through all these trauma, like all the traumatization of killing like indirectly killing these people, we think all of this daily burden, like it hinders them from actually getting any form of financial literacy, right? Because of all of these things, when you combine things like uncertainty of life, things like financial crisis that are extremely likely to happen, especially one that we're living in right now, or thirdly, short-term money injections that's only for like short-term benefits, that financial freedom is almost like unattainable inside opposition. We think what this does is that you're more likely to have things such as like when you have too much money, what this does is it encourage things like reckless usage of it, right? When you have no financial literacy, things like gambling, drinking is more likely to happen, right? Or who knows, even buy the pink diamond for right? We think what this does is at eventual point, money is going to be used sparingly, right? Because money is almost never enough. We think that even in the case where money is never going to be finished use, then money is like you have too much money anyway. We think fine, even if that's the case, we think that money is oftentimes never enough, right? Even if you don't spend all of it, you always want more. This is the normal human instinct, right? We don't think this is properly engaged inside opposition. We think that the fear of you having this finite resource of money is still going to be there. It's still evident, right? But then what does success then look like, right? I think this is going to translate to happiness, right? We think that the team that can actually prove to you things like success, this indirectly translates to happiness. So let's move on to success. What do these look like, right? This looks like things like connections, or otherwise known as connections, right? We think that what this does is that having new friends, this form of insider information, right? Because notice how one of their speakers tried to say that, oh, you are just a worker, they'll never talk to you, right? Notice this isn't true, right? When you climb out the social ladder, when you suddenly have this new form found of wealth, not only that, notice how you are also, remember, you are the person now organizing the show. You are the producer of the famous Squid Game, by the way. Everyone's gonna be your friend, right? If you ask all the rich people, they'll be like, please, I want to know you, right? I think these sort of forms of connections are only likely to happen only then when you are actually a planner underside propositions. Well, this isn't likely to happen because inside oppositions, well, when you return back to society, you are still the same person. You're just probably a rich, dirty bugger on the floor who literally cannot do anything, right? We think even with the money, we think same stereotypes are still subjected towards this individual, right? And then moving on to the point of social mobility, right? Because notice how when you cement yourself on the social ladder, when you climb out at the social mobility, right? We think this is not just like any form of money. We think now you're a successful person, you're not financially free. We think what this does, you automatically translate to happiness, right? Because you know more people, now you talk to people. We need this form of happiness is much more happier than any form of happiness that side opposition tries to present to you, right? Because it's more than just all these bad habits that they're telling you. It's more this, all these. It's not you're being bound to societal constructs. I think that's the most important thing that you need to take away from this, right? And before I move on to my next issue and next assignment, whether like life of survival, how's it going to look like? Sure, I'll take one.
So if you have billions of dollars but are permanently enslaved to a system and live under constant fear that you may get caught and killed like Spider-Man, what's the point of those billions of dollars in the first place if you can't exercise them to things that matter to you?
I think this perfectly plays into my next point, right? The life of the survivor, right? Which is trauma, right? Because notice how what's going to happen inside opposition's world, right? That people are going to relapse back inside opposition, right? Like no matter what you say, oh, it's maybe in the name of self-defense, right? We think that by virtue of you killing someone by then, you already feel pretty bad by then, right? We think what this does is you lead this person to have constantly traumatizing, right? Juggling oppressive structures like capitalism and juggling the mental trauma of murdering other people. We think what this does is that capitalism, not just that, it literally kills people by this point, right? We think what this does is that individuals are more likely to relapse, individuals are not having a good time inside opposition. We think this is a world we would rather not live in. Now, actually dealing with the POI is that we think by this point, isolation is the best form of self-actualization. This is facts, by the way, because when you tell that you've already participated in the games anyway, we think by this point, you might as well just continue it anyway, right? We think the best way to deal with this trauma is that now that you've already like indirectly killed people, and now that when you consensually kill others by this point, we think the trauma characterization flips on our world, right? We think what this does is actually numbing the killings of other individuals anyway, right? We think what this does is you lead yourself to at least much more successful financial security, financial literacy, and financial happiness in general, right? Materialistic happiness. This is all anything and everything exclusive under side proposition, right? We think that the uncertainty of death, then, now who can actually deal with it properly the life of the uncertainty of death, right? Because notice that the team can prove to you which side best deals with the randomness of death will win. It's not about because like mutually exclusive both sides are going to die. It's about how you die by this point, right? And we think the side proposition makes it very clear that the entire premise of the uncertainty of death is that you have to liberate other individuals from these oppressive structures, right? We think that you're running like, Squid Game, you're basically running the game, Stairway to Heaven, right? You're trying to save everyone from these oppressive structures, right? I think this is one way that you curb, they give meaning to your death before you actually die. We think the best way to deal with uncertainty of death is that you at least die living the meaningful life. You at least die doing something, right? Compare this to side opposition. Why? What have they done? Is that they try to fiddle around their money, try to spend on everything as they can, try to do on random businesses that are probably not going to succeed anyway, and then go to the therapist and spend all their money there, and it's never going to do any better, right? We think what this is that you lead yourself to die in a much more terrible and horrible way compared to outside when you've done actually something like, much more meaningful towards yourself. At least you have much more financial freedom. At least you do not need to worry about your money ever running out. You can buy whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, and you're not only that, you're not also subjected towards the oppressive structures known as capitalism, right? Meaning these are all important points that have to be made really clear, and this is something that Lau Can Earn has to come out and do and actually respond to in his speech. Because what have I proven to you in today's debate, right? Because I think that from my speech myself, I've already proven to you that our side has given clear success towards the individual, has given proper connections towards these individuals, and like tell them that, hey, money, you don't subject it to capitalism anymore. We think on the outside, what we also do is that we give them a proper meaning of life, right? This also looks like things, numbing the death of like other people, because you actually free them from these oppressive structures, right? And we think that giving you all these very clear and structural reasons, we think the Spider Omicron variant has been dealt with.
All right, thank you, third prop. Now calling on third op QG.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Right. You aren't a serial killer. You are a desperate father who tried to save your family. The visceral trauma of entering a killing field that you did not consent to, that you have no knowledge of. You did not choose to kill, you had to kill or be killed. In a society where you grew up thinking life is sanctity, thinking everything is more important, nothing is more important than life, where everyone tells you live until you die, where everyone cherishes life so much. The point is you go through the visceral trauma of watching real live humans slowly die around you, and you having to kill those people and end their lives, that we say cannot be ignored under their side. This is trauma being arbitrated by faceless people. That is not something Yang Ming can shake off and say that you are a morally terrible person. When you literally wake up from endless nightmares every single day out of your traumatic memories, you don't need money. The end goal of money in the end of the day has always been agency. Once you can access the agency, you should stay the hell away, not go for more rich friends or get more money. That is not in your interest. I'm going to do two very simple things. One, I'm going to tear apart Yang Ming's speech one strand by one strand. Secondly, I'm going to talk about moral compasses and what under our side, just generally the guy is better off. Okay, let's look at what Yang Ming talked about. Because his point about the instability of life is kind of basically the point about success and fulfillment anyway. So let's look at what they say in specific. One, capitalist system is unstable. Two, stigma to help the poor is minimal. Three, you need to repay your debts and your obligations. Therefore, your impact is that you'll be poor and you'll revert to bad habits because your cash is not enough. So if I prove to you that the world works in a way that 162 million can probably last you for a while, yeah, the argument's gone. So, okay, not yet. Three things they said about reasons. One, it doesn't require a lot of skill to organize these childhood games. I have four responses. One, you need to constantly up your game because you need to find out more and more creative ways of literally killing people. Granted, Kieve literally considered that traumatic memories will hinder you. One, I don't see how you'll work very comfortably now that you're hindered by deaths of other people. But two, it's not easy to fulfill the demands of the rich when they want to see increasingly more and more grotesque things. Two, organizing a killing game is not easy because you need to account for everything, the food and the water of these people, how they are not going to tell anyone else, how no one will escape, how the one person that survives will be made sure that no one spills out. It's incredibly difficult to organize this and find a location where you will not get caught. And granted, you are in a society where you have so much bias, so much stereotype, you're likely to be one that isn't that educated at all to even know how to organize it or even know the geographical location or where to host it anyway. But three, it is absolute madness to say that organizing ways to kill people is easy. For the simple reason that even if Kieve wants to get away with it by saying that, oh, you're not actually killing them, you're planning how to kill them, notice how grotesque it is to plan how someone will be grinded. Notice how grotesque it is to ensure that only one person survives. What if two people survive? You need to ensure literally everyone dies. It is not easy. And let's flip it. Let's say you're actually smart. Let's say you're actually a smart person. If you are smart, then under our world, you're probably smart enough to invest and to find ways to make money anyway, so you don't even need to join the job. So even if you're dumb or smart, we win. Okay, next. They say you get a fixed income. One, let's do the math. 168 million. Let's say you want to buy a house, that's 5 million. You want to buy a Lamborghini, that's 3 million. You want to pay off your debts, maybe 20 million. You still have 100 million. I don't see what's the math with this. But also you can just invest and like hire investors that know how to predict that capitalism is like, very volatile and everything. So I don't see why you can't get financial opportunity on the outside anyway. But let's look at the POI that I said to Varun. My POI was that in a world where capitalism is unvolatile, rich people shouldn't exist. His response was they grow up wealthy. I don't see the difference between if you grew up wealthy and if you were like midway through life, then become wealthy, then have money to like buy things and get education. Yeah, sure, it takes time, but like in that 4 years, it's unlikely that 168 billion will just walk out of your door anyway. So as much as they want to debate in debate land, unfortunately, we have to return to the real world. Sorry, kids. Okay, lastly, they talk about why the impact of having power and position is important because you get to watch people die, inherently contradicting your own Guff-Whip when he says that trauma hinders you. Now you say you will enjoy people dying. One is true, one is wrong. Who is right, who is wrong? Reply only can answer this question, but I'm going to deal with it anyway. Because on the outside, we think that as a self-centered person, even if you're a psychopath, your life matters more. Okay, sure, try to defend yourself.
To be honest, on both sides, you're still gonna be a slave. On your side, it's to capitalism. On our side, you get money. On the comparative of up, you're more likely gonna revert back to being poor.
Okay, one, on your side, you can't even exercise that money when you're busy planning a game for the rest of your life. Secondly, under your side, you may die. Thirdly, on the outside, you don't even need to do anything. You can spend all you want. On the outside, we tell you why we have literal incentives for this actor to just continue making financial safety nets for themselves. I don't see why that's bad anyway. But even if you're going to be dirt poor, I'm going to explain why it's better on their side. Notice the entirety then, if you were to just pretend that key speech didn't exist, that they're contingent upon having a terrible moral compass. The nature of Squid Game is such that you literally didn't know that you were joining in the first place. So you acted out of self-defense and desperation. This means to say, under their world, especially if you were to accept Guff-Whip's analysis, that you're likely to suffer from the immense trauma that you went through in Squid Game, and you have to be constantly reminded of it every single day when you plan different ways to kill other people anyway. And secondly, okay, just as an average person, like not an average person, just not a sadist in general. Like literally an average person just doesn't want to kill other people. I just don't see why the analysis stands when like majority of people out in the world like aren't literally serial killers. Like, even by a statistical basis, they lose out anyway. So they cannot get away with all the trauma and gruesome memories that will come back to you on the outside. So even if we agree under their side, sure, you're a psychopath, sure, you get no money. Why is it that we still win? Simple, you still might die. And why is there a high likelihood, which they did not respond to? One, organizing is hard and maintaining profits is hard. Granted, your likely background as someone who has no experience in this, which means you're likely to fail expectations. And also because the demands of the rich are ever increasing, because more and more people slowly get desensitized to more and more violence, which means you get a higher and higher barrier of entry and higher demand for more and more grotesque things. But also, if we were to accept Guff-Whip's analysis that you're going to make your rich connections, the more friends you have, the more likely it is the secret will go out, the more likely you'll die. Notice here, even if it's just a risk and it won't happen, the value of an argument lies in a function called probability times impact. The risk here outweighs all the benefit under their side because it's contingent upon it. You cannot enjoy your money if you are dead. The very risk that you might die already weighs out everything under their side when you already proved you are, it's likely that you will die anyway. And lastly, if you were to accept the analysis that you're a psychopathic actor, you probably are self-centered and you probably want to live. That's the minimal consideration of someone, and probably one of the most important consideration of someone. Money literally doesn't matter if you're dead. Okay, so let's look at this, right? What's the basic incentive structure actor that basically takes down their entire case? Why did the actor join Squid Game? Actor joined Squid Game because he wanted freedom. He was in crippling debt and was desperate. He needed freedom from loan sharks. He needed freedom from the constrictive world that he was in. The only way he was going to do that was through money. Now that you literally got enough money to pay off all of these constrictive debts, and now that you're a free man, that means to say money was a means to an end. Money was never ever your end goal, but merely the means to getting agency. Under our world, when Umar already tells you why under their world is incredibly uncertain that the contract is going to stay the way it is, that you're likely to be either be replaced or even worse still, get caught and basically like be assassinated anyway. Under our side, even if you have no money, at the very least, the basic incentive of agency is there because now you're free of your debts and you're free to start again as a new person. We prove to you that A, you get enough money on the outside, but B, even if you don't, living and having agency is more important, and C, the traumatic memories that hurt you won't exist on the outside. That's why they lost. Okay, so what's the comparative then on the outside? On the outside, they get visceral trauma, which again, makes your life terrible because you're constantly living in fear also that you'll get found out. But two, we are willing to settle for a more modest life in the very minimal basis that we are continuing to live, and at the very least, we can access immaterial benefits such as seeing your family, such as seeing your kid. These are things that money cannot buy. As much as you want to think money can solve all your problems, it simply can't oppose.
All right, thanks. Third op now calling on op reply. Here.
Okay. Yes. So before that, fun debate. But yeah, we'll have to give another speech. Okay. 3, 2, 1. 3 structural problems with proposition. 1, none of their material is proximate towards the interest of the actor. I don't know why the average poor person would enjoy hanging out with their literal wealthy oppressors rather than having the freedom to actually spend their money and interact with people that were closer towards them in the first place. Number 2, they're just not comparative. Of course, you can't be a perfect Squid Game frontman organizer. And of course, you can't be a perfect capitalist worker in the real world because you don't have the immediate financial literacy skills. The debate was then about the comparative as to where you were likely to be better off, which we received insufficient response from Kieve about how it was likely to be true. You were going to be better off in a system where your skills and the ability, the time frame to which you could develop those skills was actively less because of the time-sensitive nature of the Squid Game. But thirdly, it just riddled with contradictions. Like Yang says, no, you'll never use the money. Kieve says you'll spend all the money on drugs. Only one of these things can be true, but realistically, the poor person who knows the visceral harms of what it's like to be poor is probably not going to waste their money on drugs because per their own analysis, it's probably going to be true that the person wants to avoid the worst excesses of harms of capitalism and therefore carry out the money in ways that were going to be good. Let's deal with the other side. Yang Ming is correct. On both sides, you will somewhat be a slave to capitalism. But the debate was about scales and comparatives, and it completely failed to show why it was like to be better on their side. 3 reasons as to why it's comparatively better on our side, even if you're a slave to capitalism on both. The first thing to say is you can enjoy the fruits of your labor, because the problem with capitalism is that you don't get paid fairly for whatever you do. You have to do lots of things and lots of stressful, and then you don't get money out of it. But you're complete like because you're not constrained to the Squid Game, you actually are able to exercise those money. Because even on their side, with a quantitatively greater amount of money, the ability for you to actually exercise agency by spending that money is actively limited. We also just prove why the money isn't valuable over a certain threshold because of decreasing marginal utility. But number 2, the punishments you face for messing up are far worse. If you mess up as a regular office worker, worst case, you get fired and you get a bad mark on your CV. Here, if you make a minor mistake or a mistake that was not even attributed to your immediate actions, you will be beheaded just like this guy. No response from Kieve as well. But thirdly, there's just no opt-out. The reason why we value money was to increase the agency, and you cannot have agency and choices under their side. Because let's take the absolute worst case of our side, assuming that you have no immediate ability to get a job, no immediate ability to make a huge stream of income. At the very least, the options are available for you. You can try out many different things because the immediate priority of this person was not to be a wealthy billionaire. And therefore, if there's some degree of time where they just have limited money, they have to live in a slightly smaller apartment, that's all right with them because their whole life they've been conditioned to believe that that was something that's okay, and they're used to it already. And so therefore, the comparatives when you opt out under their side is far worse because the guys are literally going to kill you because they're fearful of you spreading the secrets to other people. So you can't opt out because their side agrees it's a permanent thing. Even taking them by their absolute best case, where proposition asserts that you have a short but good life, like you know that mac and cheese meme on Twitter, that is premised upon the life of proposition being good. But why is this not likely to be true? Even if your life was stable and the Squid Game organizers promised you that for the rest of your life you can stay within this room and we'll give you money, we'll give you stability. The problem is at the point where you mess up, at the point where you may eventually make a minor mistake, you'll be blamed for it, and therefore you'll be used as a scapegoat for these people to then do really bad things things towards you. You have no ability to negotiate that contract, which once again receive no response from their side because of the power asymmetry, because no ability to hold these people accountable. The comparative is that you can probably sue your boss in the real world, even if you can't completely win the case. At the very least, there's some degree of ability to do that on their side. But in no response towards the mental harms as well, because like Varun can't say like, oh, it's symmetrical, because it's obviously on a scale, right? Because on their side, it's far worse because you necessarily made the consensual choice to kill different people and were complicit in the harms they were suffering. Because even if on both sides people were going to die from the Squid Game, at the very least, you weren't the hand that was influencing the things in the middle of the Squid Game. You weren't the people that gave the green light to actually put that trap, and the Venus flytrap killed someone. I don't know how the Squid Game works, but it's far worse under their side, because on our side, at least it was an act of self-defense. So sure, the harms can be symmetrical, but you're not actually contributing towards these things. And therefore, it's likely to be true that only one team can take this debate. So yeah, fun. It's like all Malaysian finals except Ken, because he's a Singaporean now. But in the very least, under their side, you are completely stuck in like one country. You can never make the choice like Ken did to move to Singapore, because you are permanently shackled by circumstances out of your control. We protect the agency. We're very proud to oppose.
Right, thanks, Op reply. Finally, to end this debate, Prop reply, please. Here.
Hi, just check if I'm audible.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. Good debate. All right, thank you so much. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. We agree that both sides, you're kind of a slave. It's whether you want to be a slave and get certain amounts of money and have comparatively greater freedom, or to be a slave and have the possibility of just going back to the traumatic, miserable life that you sought to escape by having the Squid Game. Notice that the only impact on opposition to the end of all of their responses that they hit was that, yeah, we want to have agency and we want to enjoy your life with the money you earn and the family you have. So long as my reply speech strategically frames out all of their claims and downplay all these impacts, side of proposition can already win by virtue of us actually showing a better comparative on our side of the house. The first thing I want to contend is just, will you finish spending the money, and whether or not having money is like important in this debate. Because opposition firstly contends that, yeah, your money not going to finish, so you won't worry and you can spend it. Proposition says that regardless of whether or not your money will finish or not, the inherent worry of your money being gone is sufficient for you to not want to spend a lot of money, or the times in which you actually feel impulsive, that's when you actually make the worst forms of decisions. Note that opposition really underanalyzed the ways in which this individual would just invest in the stock market by OO, and then decides to also just frame the fact that, oh, you're going to have the ability to safety nets because you're going to get education and you can uplift yourself. The problem that is already existing, that this actor has already brought up to you by first of proposition, that you don't really have much time left. You're old, you're poor, you don't really have much background to literacy, your money is going to actually just be lost in the future. But proposition structurally explains on first of like in our first speech to how your life would be absolutely screwed in society. But the likelihood of you actually being able to keep your money until you die is just very unlikely on side of opposition. The conclusion to this entirely is that proposition is just far more likely and far just better in proving why is it that your money is going to be lost if you stay on opposition. That means to say that you aren't really going to enjoy it as much as possible. About the money, like comparatively on our side, proposition is able to actually show a positive comparative about how the money can still be used to buy the things you want on the island if you remain on the front man. But that means the impact of you having financial freedom stays on proposition, where you don't need to worry about the money just running out. You don't have to care whether or not you're going to run. The money is the most important thing in this debate. We cannot deny it, because in this capitalist world that we both live in on both sides, that's the debate winning point in which you get more money, you get to use it freely. Opposition can't just run away with all these things, saying that we lose. We conclusively win this first point. But secondly, on agency and happiness, because they point out a lot of these things and we really want to respond to this, and we did. The first is just you want to be a free man, you want to be shackled by anybody else. To be honest, society is even more restrictive, that we pointed out. You have to adhere to rules, you have social narratives, a lot of these things shackle you to being another normal individual who works a 9-to-5 job to continue earning this amount of money, and a lot of times you don't even really get to be free in of itself. Secondly, on terms of moral compass and happiness, because you don't want to kill like other people, that's the claim they have. You willingly kind of saw people dying, and that by the point in time you already saw 400 people die. The traumatic experience of death isn't really going to be that like severe, like third proposition point out. But society is also absolutely crap when you establish in first prop that capitalism is gonna just kill you when you don't really have money. That's why people systemically just give up on their life and just in the end just still die. But on the point about relationships that we want to bring to you, this is the best comparative that we wanted to bring. The unresponded point is that proposition brought up was that capitalism and the life you live in is already miserably, and you are unlikely to be able to be happy. So it's already analyzed you. We don't really get that significant of a response. Then they tell you you're gonna die and lose everything. I think proposition already shows why the ability for you to run these games is significantly less due to inherent knowledge you already have about these games. That means in terms of scale, it's easier for you to actually succeed on our side and not get killed. But if it's something about being easily replaceable, I think proposition already mitigates it at the start. Society has more pawns at their disposal. You aren't really able to actually just keep your job in life anyway. The ability for you to be able to sustain your life is comparatively lower when a larger amount of people in life are competing with you. The comparative on our side is simple. The first, in terms of like the relationships and the freedom that you have, you get to do whatever you want on the island. You get to spend so much more money, decide how the games go, actually deal with having greater relations with friend and power that you have. It was never really responded to. So you have friends, you have the greater ability to actually be free. But secondly, in terms of happiness, I think because we get to escape from all the miserable instances in life from society, there's no need for us to care about these things anymore. We get this island, we get this power significantly in terms of the ways in which we actually live our lives and die in the end. We structurally take this debate on side of proposition. Thank you very much. I'll to propose one last time. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Prop reply. Thanks, debaters. You may now cross the house.